My name is Daniel Hayes. I work the night shift at a remote facility most people don't even know exists. It's the kind of place you only end up at if you need the money, or if you're trying to disappear for a while. The job posting was vague. Good pay. No questions asked. When I was hired, they didn't warn me about monsters. They didn't mention ghosts. They didn't even tell me what the facility was really for. Instead, the supervisor slid a laminated sheet across the desk and said, "Read this. Memorize it. Follow the rules. Because if you break them, we won't come looking for you." The facility sits hours away from the nearest town. No bars, no gas stations, no cell service. Once you turn off the highway, there's nothing but dirt road, radio static, and the feeling that you've already gone too far to turn back. The fence shows up first. Chain link, 8 feet high, topped with rusted wire that hums when the wind hits it just right. Behind it, floodlights wash the ground in pale white circles, like the place is being interrogated by its own security system. And in the center of it all, the building, concrete, low. No windows on the lower level. At night it hums, not loud enough to notice at first, just constant. Like something inside is breathing in its sleep. Night shift is supposed to be easy. That's what they told me. You show up at 10 p.m., clock in. Pour yourself a cup of coffee from a pot that's been burnt since the Clinton administration. Then you make your rounds. Check the generator panel. Voltage steady. Fuel levels logged. Walk the perimeter fence. Count the lights. Make sure none of them flicker out. Back inside, you sit in front of the monitors. 6 cameras. Black and white. No sound. Most nights, nothing happens. The worst part is staying awake while the coffee turns sour in your stomach and the radio plays the same 3 late-night talk shows on repeat. That's the job. At least, that's what it looked like on paper. My first week, I worked with 3 other guards, Tom, Elliot, and Ron. All of them had been there longer than me. All of them were quiet, not unfriendly, just careful. They answered questions about the job, about the schedule, about the weather. But whenever I asked about the facility itself, the conversation died. "What do we actually monitor here?" I asked once. Tom just shrugged. "Equipment," he said. Elliot changed the subject. Ron pretended not to hear me. I noticed other things too. They never joked about the night shift. They never complained about it, and they never, ever stayed inside after midnight. At 11:55, one of them would always glance at the wall clock. At 11:58, they'd start gathering their things. At 11:59, someone would say something like, "I should check the south fence. Generator needs another look. Forgot something in my truck." And then they were gone. Every time, leaving me alone in the control room with the hum, the monitors, and the radio static. The first night it happened, I laughed it off, figured it was a habit, or superstition. Second night, it felt strange. Third night, it felt deliberate. By the end of the week, I stopped asking, because once midnight hit, the building felt different. Not darker, not colder, just attentive. The hum seemed louder. The lights outside felt harsher, like they were trying too hard to keep something back. And every so often, I caught myself leaning closer to the monitors, watching for movement. Not because I'd seen anything, but because a part of me was convinced that if I looked away too long, I'd miss it. The cameras didn't glitch. They paused. Every night at exactly 2:17 a.m., one camera froze for 5 seconds. Same frame, same angle, Same empty slice of fence line and gravel, just long enough to make your skin crawl. The first time it happened, I didn't even realize it. I was half asleep in the chair, eyes burning from the monitors, coffee cold in my hand. The image on camera 3 stopped moving and my brain filled in the gap like a skipped breath. Then the clock ticked over. 2:17:05. The feed snapped back to life like nothing had happened. I rewound the recording, watched it again. 5 seconds. Perfect stillness. No distortion, no snow, no flicker. Just a pause. I told myself it was old equipment, condensation, static. That's what you do on night shift. You explain things away, because the alternative means admitting you're not alone out there. The second night, I caught it on purpose. I stared at camera 3 at 2:16, like I could intimidate it into behaving. The feed rolled, wind pushing weeds against the fence, the floodlight glare making hard shadows on the ground. 2:17. Pause. 5 seconds. I held my breath without meaning to. When it came back, the weeds were in a different position, like the world had kept moving while the camera chose not to. That's when I started noticing the pattern around it. The lights didn't flicker randomly, they flickered on a schedule. At 1:03 a.m., the far perimeter light on the west side would blink twice, like a slow wink. At 1:41, the nearest floodlight by the gate would dim for a single heartbeat. And at 2:17, something about the whole place seemed to lean in. I tried to be logical, tried to be the kind of guy who'd worked warehouse nights in college, who'd driven delivery routes in the snow and laughed about it later. I'd been tired before, I'd been alone before. This felt different. It wasn't fear like a jump scare. It was the steady pressure of being watched through a keyhole you couldn't find. On the third night, I got up at 2:10 and walked closer to the monitors just to prove to myself I wasn't spooked. I check the timestamps. I check the connection lights under each screen. All green. Then I noticed something I hadn't noticed before. A dead zone. Camera 2 covered the south corner of the fence. Its view was clean, sharp, and bright, except for one strip near the bottom right, a narrow band where the image looked wrong. Not blurry, not dark, just slightly out of place, like a piece of the picture had been replaced with a similar piece from somewhere else. I leaned in until my nose almost touched the glass. The strip didn't move with the wind like everything else. The gravel didn't shift. The shadows didn't change. It was like that part of the camera's world was frozen all the time. I tried switching to the backup feed. Same strip. I reset the camera from the control panel. Same strip. And suddenly, for no good reason, I remembered the way Tom watched the clock at 11:55. The way Ron never laughed. The way Elliot's jaw tightened whenever the radio crackled too loud. At 2:16, the control room smelled normal. Dust, stale coffee, warm plastic from the electronics. At 2:17, the smell changed. Ozone, like a lightning strike too close. And underneath it, something damp. Wet earth, not the clean smell of rain, the smell of soil that's been turned over, freshly dug, like something had been pulled up from deep down and left in the air to rot. I stood there, breathing through my mouth, trying not to show it bothered me, because that's what men do when they're scared. They pretend they're not. At 2:17, camera 3 paused again, and this time, while it was frozen, the radio clicked. Just once. A soft mechanical sound, like a switch flipping by itself. I stared at it. The old radio sat on the desk like a lump of plastic and static. The volume knob hadn't moved. The channel hadn't changed. but the red transmit light blinked once, like it had heard something it wasn't supposed to hear. The pause ended, everything returned, and the building's hum seemed satisfied. I didn't log any of it, not because I didn't believe it happened, because writing it down would make it real. The next night, I brought my own coffee, fresh, strong, the kind that tastes like it could scrape rust off a bumper. I ate dinner before my shift. I slept a full 8 hours. I did everything people tell you to do when you start seeing things. And it still happened. 2:17. Pause. 5 seconds. Same frame. Except, this time, something small had changed. A shape near the fence line. Not a person, not an animal, just a darker patch against the gravel, like a stain. I rewound it, watched it again. Before the pause, the gravel was clean. After the pause, the stain was there, like the camera had blinked and reality had slipped a detail into place. My stomach tightened, and I hated myself for feeling relieved when the clock moved forward. I kept watching. The stain didn't move. It just sat there, darker than the shadows around it, too still to be natural. At 2:23, I looked away to jot down generator readings. When I looked back, the stain was gone. No footprints, no trail, nothing. That was the first time I felt my logic lose ground. Because equipment can freeze, lights can flicker, smells can drift through vents, but stains don't appear and vanish like they're thinking. Around 3 a.m., I heard a sound above me. A soft, slow scuff, like a boot sole dragging across concrete. I froze in the chair. The control room was on the top floor. There was no floor above me. I waited for the sound to repeat, telling myself it was the building settling, pipes cooling, some normal structural noise. It happened again. Scuff, a pause, scuff, measured, patient, like something pacing. I didn't move. I didn't even swallow. I sat there with my eyes locked on the monitors, while the hairs on my arms stood up. Then the sound stopped, and for a moment the facility felt pleased again, like it had tested me and decided I'd done the right thing. By the end of the week, my body had started anticipating 2:17 the way it anticipates pain. My hands would sweat, my tongue would go dry. I'd check the clock without meaning to. I started walking the perimeter earlier, trying to convince myself the fence was solid, the lights were bright, the world was normal. Outside, the night was huge. The floodlights didn't illuminate the darkness, they carved holes in it. Everything beyond the fence looked flatter than it should, like the distance had been painted black. Sometimes out there, I felt a pressure in my ears, like standing too close to a speaker. Not noise, something else. A low frequency you don't hear so much as you feel in your bones. And the smell, ozone, wet earth, kept coming back, stronger on some nights than others. On Friday, I finally asked Tom again, not about the facility, not directly. I just said, "Why do you guys always step out before midnight?" Tom stared at his coffee like it had offended him. He didn't answer for a long time. Then he said, "Because we like living." I laughed because that's what people do when they don't know how to respond. Tom didn't laugh back. He looked at me for the first time like he was deciding whether I was stupid or doomed. "Did you read the sheet?" he asked. "The rules?" I said. Tom's eyes flicked to the clock. 11:57. "You're new," he said quietly. "So I'll say this once." His voice went lower. "Don't try to understand it." The way he said it, like it was a thing you could accidentally invite in, made my chest tighten. "What is it?" I asked, and I hated how small my voice sounded. Tom stood up. "Midnight's coming," he said. At 11:59, Tom picked up his jacket and walked out. Ron followed without a word. Elliot avoided my eyes, and then I was alone again. I watched the clock roll over. 12 o'clock. The hum deepened like a throat clearing. The lights outside sharpened, and somewhere in the building, a door closed softly. Not a slam, not a bang. A careful, deliberate click, like someone had just stepped into a room and didn't want to be heard. I stayed in the chair, I stared at the monitors, and I waited for 2:17 like a man waiting for a storm he can't outrun. I laughed when I first read them. Thought it was some kind of hazing ritual, the kind of thing older guards do to see how the new guy reacts. A prank, a tradition, a way to make the night feel less empty. But then I noticed something. The rules weren't written like jokes. They were written like corrections, like someone had already made every mistake and didn't survive long enough to explain it. The sheet was laminated, corners worn from being handled too many times. The ink wasn't fresh. It had that slightly faded look of something printed years ago and kept alive only because it still mattered. At the top, in bold, it said, "Night Shift Procedures. Read and obey." And beneath that, the 6 rules. No corporate logo, no HR contact, no please, no thank you. Just commands. I kept telling myself it was exaggerated. Security theater. A remote facility spookened its own employees into compliance. Then, the first rule tested me. Rule number 1. Never acknowledge movement outside the fence after midnight. The first time I broke it, I didn't speak out loud. I didn't wave. I didn't shout. I didn't even open the door. I just looked. It was 12:34 a.m. I was watching camera 4, the west fence, because the floodlight there had blinked twice like it always did. The gravel beyond the fence was empty. Then something moved. A slow shift at the edge of the light, like a shadow deciding to stand up. It wasn't a person, not the right shape, too tall in one moment, too thin in the next. It didn't walk like anything with legs. It slid. My brain tried to label it. A deer, a coyote, a trick of the wind. But it moved again, closer, without making the weeds move, without disturbing the gravel, without casting a normal shadow. I leaned forward, and the moment I did, the thing stopped. Not like it had been startled, like it had been waiting for that. On the monitor, it held perfectly still at the edge of the floodlight, half in darkness, half in that white glare. It didn't have a face, not that I could see, just a suggestion of a head where a head should be. And I felt, deep in my chest, that it knew I was watching. My mouth went dry. I forced myself to lean back in the chair, eyes forward, breathing slow, like a man pretending he isn't afraid. The thing remained there for another minute. Then the floodlight blinked once. When it came back, the fence line was empty again. No tracks, no movement, no explanation. At 12:40, Tom came back inside. He took one look at my face and didn't ask what I saw. He just said, "Rule 1, I swallowed." "Yeah." Tom nodded like a doctor confirming a diagnosis. "Next time," he said, "don't even lean in." That's when I understood what acknowledge meant. It wasn't about talking, it was about attention. Rule number 2, if the radio calls your name, do not answer. The radio sat on the desk like a relic, old plastic, scratched faceplate, antenna bent slightly to one side. It should have been harmless, but after 2:17 started happening, the radio felt hungry, like it was always listening. The first time it called my name, it wasn't a voice from the speaker, it was the static, a soft hiss that shaped itself into syllables. "Dan." "Eel." Not loud, not clear, but close enough that my body reacted before my mind did. I flinched. I looked around the empty room like I'd been caught doing something wrong. The hair on my neck rose. I waited, telling myself it was pareidolia, the brain finding patterns in noise. Then it happened again. Daniel Hayes. Full name. This time, it sounded like it came from behind me, not from the radio at all. Like someone whispering into the back of my skull. My mouth opened before I could stop it. Not to answer, just to breathe. And that tiny opening, just that instinctive reaction, made the radio crackle sharply, like it was pleased. I clamped my jaw shut. I stared at the monitor. The transmit light blinked. Once. Twice. Then the radio clicked onto a different channel by itself. A low voice bled through the static. Not a dispatcher. Not a guard. A calm, patient voice, like someone reading a bedtime story. "Daniel," it said, "we can hear you." My heart slammed hard enough to hurt. I didn't answer. I kept my hands flat on the desk so I wouldn't reach for the mic. I counted in my head, not for 60, just to keep my thoughts from sliding apart. The voice continued. It didn't threaten. It didn't yell. It just talked, softly, like it had all night. "Daniel," it said again, "tell us you're awake." The monitors stayed normal. The hum stayed steady. The building didn't change. Only the radio. Only the voice. I understood then why they made the rule simple. Because the danger wasn't dramatic. It was conversational. It wanted you to participate. At 3 a.m. the radio went dead again, like a predator losing interest. I sat there for a long time afterward, angry at myself for almost answering, because the truth was, part of me wanted to, not because I was brave, because loneliness makes you stupid. Rule number 3. Do not leave the control room between 2 and 3 a.m. By the time I tested this rule, I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was trying to prove the rules were still rules, human things, written by humans, something I could outthink. At 1:58, I told myself I'd just step into the hallway. 10 seconds, touch the wall, step back. That's all. Nothing supernatural about a hallway. At 2 o'clock, I stood up. The hum deepened, subtle but immediate, like the building noticed movement. The lights above the desk didn't flicker. They brightened, just slightly, like they wanted a better look at me. I walked to the door of the control room. My hand hovered over the handle. A thought came into my head that wasn't mine. Don't. I froze. Then I told myself it was fear-socking, just my own nerves. I opened the door. The hallway beyond was the same hallway it had always been. Gray walls, industrial carpet, emergency exit signs glowing green. Quiet. I stepped out, and the air changed. Not temperature, not humidity. Pressure, like stepping underwater. The sound of the hum became louder, not in my ears but in my teeth, vibrating along my jaw. I took one more step. The lights in the hallway dimmed to that sickly half-power you see during a blackout. Behind me, the control room door clicked shut. I hadn't closed it. I turned. The handle didn't move. I tried again. Locked. My pulse spiked. I told myself the lock was automatic. Security protocol. Nothing paranormal. Then, the hallway at the far end, where it turned left toward the stairwell, shifted. Not physically. Not like walls moving. Like my perception of distance changed. The corner looked farther away than it should. The exit sign looked smaller, like it had receded, like the building had stretched itself. I walked forward, fast. The corner didn't get closer. The carpet under my boots didn't squeak, didn't compress. It felt like walking on something dead. From somewhere ahead I heard the softest sound, a breath, not mine. A slow inhale, like someone enjoying a smell. The ozone scent hit me hard. Wet earth underneath. I stopped walking. I held perfectly still. And the distance snapped back to normal, so fast it made me dizzy. The corner was close again, the exit sign normal size. Behind me, the control room door clicked, unlocked. I backed into the room without taking my eyes off the hallway. I shut the door. I locked it manually, even though my hands were shaking too much to feel confident. I checked the clock. 2:02. 2 minutes. That's all it took for the building to show me what between 2 and 3 really meant. It wasn't a time window, it was a feeding hour. Rule number 4. If you hear footsteps above you, but you're on the top floor, stay still. I didn't need to test this one. It tested me. It started subtle. A soft scuff overhead, then another, then the slow pacing, measured, patient. Like something wearing boots that didn't belong to any human shift. I sat frozen at my desk, hands still, eyes on the monitors. The instinct to look up was strong, almost painful, like my neck wanted to snap backward, but the rule said, stay still. So I did. The footsteps crossed directly over me. Stop, turn, cross again. It felt deliberate, like it was tracing the shape of the room from above, learning where I sat, where the desk was, where the door was. Then the pacing stopped. Silence. And in that silence, I realized something worse. The footsteps had weight, real weight. The ceiling panels didn't creak like a building settling. They creaked like they were supporting something heavy. Then, right above my head, came a slow, dragging sound. Like fingernails across concrete. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. My eyes watered, not from emotion, but from the primal urge to move. Because everything in you screams that if something is above you, you should get away. But night shift taught me the opposite. Sometimes survival is not action. Sometimes survival is obedience. The dragging stopped. A beat of silence. Then a single careful tap, like a knuckle on glass. The ceiling tile directly above me flexed down half an inch. Just enough to show it could. I didn't look up. I didn't breathe. And eventually, after what felt like hours but was probably 60 seconds, the weight lifted, the creaks faded, the building's hum settled back into its usual rhythm. Afterward, my shirt was damp with sweat. I stared at the rule sheet on the desk like it was a holy text, because nothing about that sound belonged in a normal world. Rule number 5, never open the south door. Even if someone knocks, the south door wasn't like the others. It was heavier, newer, reinforced. 2 deadbolts, a thick rubber seal around the frame like it was meant to keep pressure in or out. There was no window on it, no peephole, just a metal slab painted the same dull gray as the hallway. I asked Ron once what was behind it. He didn't even glance up from his paperwork. "Nothing you need," he said. That should have been enough, but humans aren't built to accept nothing when there's a door. So the first time I heard knocking, I moved before I thought. It was 12:11 a.m. 3 knocks, soft, polite, not banging, not desperate. Like someone at a neighbor's house, trying not to wake the kids. I froze in my chair. The monitors showed no movement. The fence line was quiet. Then another set of knocks. 3 again. Same rhythm. My throat tightened. I stood up. Half my brain said, "Don't." The other half said, "Maybe it's Tom. Maybe it's Elliot. Maybe someone locked themselves out." I took one step toward the hallway. The hum deepened like a warning. 3 knocks again, and this time, a voice followed them. It wasn't coming through the radio. It was muffled through the door. Close. Human. "Hey," it said. "Can you open up?" My blood ran cold, because the voice sounded like Elliot. Same tone. Same tired, half-amused cadence. But Elliot was outside, making rounds. I'd seen him leave. I'd watched him on camera 1 at 12:05. The voice spoke again. "Daniel," it said. "It's cold out here." It knew my name. I stood in the control room doorway, staring down the hallway toward the south door I couldn't see from my angle. The urge to help was violent. It reached into my chest like a hook. That's the trick, I realized. Rules aren't hard to follow when the threat is obvious. Rules are hard when they weaponize your decency. 3 knocks again. Then the voice changed. It was still Elliot's voice, but wrong. Too steady. Too controlled. Like an actor holding a perfect impression. "Open the door," it said softly. "We don't like waiting." The rubber seal around the south door made a faint squeak, like it was being pressed from the other side. Not a hand. Something broad. Something testing the frame. I backed away from the hallway. I returned to my chair. I stared at the monitors. The knocking stopped. For a moment, I felt relief. Then the radio crackled once, and a whisper slipped through the static. Good choice. I didn't sleep after that shift. Rule number 6. If the lights turn red, close your eyes and count to 60. This one sounded the most ridiculous on paper. Lights don't turn red unless someone changes the bulbs. And if they do, what good does closing your eyes do? But by the time the red lights happened, I had stopped doubting. It started at 2:16. That minute before the pause, the air in the control room went heavy. The hum deepened. The smell of ozone crawled in like smoke. Then the overhead lights flickered. Once, twice, and the color shifted. Not fully red at first, more like the world had been dipped in blood. A dim, oppressive glow that made shadows look thicker and corners look deeper. My skin prickled. On the rule sheet, the words might as well have been carved into stone. Close your eyes and count to 60. I didn't want to. Everything in me wanted to look, to witness, to confirm. But I remembered the movement outside the fence, stopping when I leaned in. I remembered the radio's voice getting stronger when I reacted. I remembered the hallway stretching when I stepped out. Attention fed it. So I closed my eyes. Darkness behind my lids. I counted. 1, 2, 3. At 10, I heard something inside the control room that wasn't the hum. A faint, wet sound. Like mud being stirred. At 20, the smell of wet earth got stronger, so strong it made me gag. At 30, I heard a soft exhale beside my ear. Not on the radio, not above the ceiling. Beside me. As if something had leaned down to smell my hair. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would give me away. I kept counting. 40. At 45, I felt the pressure of presence. The way you can feel someone standing close behind you, even if you don't hear them. At 50, a whisper slipped through the air, gentle as breath. Look. My eyes twitched, trying to open. I forced them shut harder. 57, 58, 59, 60. The red light vanished. The overhead bulbs returned to their normal harsh white. The hum softened. I opened my eyes. Nothing in the room had moved. The monitors were normal. The chair beside mine was empty, but on the desk, next to the radio, there was a smear of dark, wet dirt, fresh, and in it, a partial print. Not a boot, not a hand. Something with too many joints. Too long, like a finger that didn't know when to stop growing. I sat there, staring at it, unable to blink. Then, slowly, The smear began to dry, like whatever left it had already moved on. That was the moment I finally understood the facility. It wasn't haunted like a house is haunted. It was managed, contained, like a pen holding something that didn't belong in the world. And the rules weren't for my comfort. They were instructions for keeping the door shut. Because the building wasn't protecting me from what was outside. It was protecting what was outside from realizing I was inside. At 3:15 a.m., the radio clicked once, no voice, just static. And buried deep in that static, like a smile, I heard a sound that might have been laughter, or might have been my name, being practiced. It was Marcus who broke the rules. He was young, needed overtime, the kind of kid who still believed every problem had a reasonable explanation if you looked hard enough. He showed up on a Monday with a backpack, a fast handshake, and that too bright energy you only see in people who haven't been worn down yet. "Man, this place is crazy," he said, looking around the control room like it was a movie set. "Remote facility, night shift, hazard pay. I'm telling you, my buddies are gonna think I'm doing black ops." Tom didn't laugh. Ron didn't even look up. I tried to keep it friendly. I remembered what it felt like to be new. I remembered how you want to prove you can handle it. So I just said, "Read the sheet, memorize it." Marcus smirked. Yeah, the rules." He said it like air quotes. That was the first sign. Not his attitude, his confidence. Because confidence is what the facility feeds on. It turns it into curiosity. Curiosity into mistakes. The first night with Marcus was quiet. Too quiet. The hum sounded thicker, like the building had swallowed something and was digesting it slowly. We did rounds together, checked the generator, logged temps. The outside air smelled clean for once, cold and sharp, no wet earth underneath. At 11:55, Tom glanced at the clock. At 11:58, he grabbed his jacket. Marcus noticed. "Where you going?" he asked. Tom said, "Outside." "Why?" Tom looked at him for a long second, then said, "Habit." That was Tom's way of saying, "Don't ask." Marcus shrugged. "All right, I'll stay with Daniel." Tom's eyes flicked to me, a warning, not dramatic, just tired. At 11:59, Tom and Ron left. The door shut behind them. Marcus leaned back in the chair like he'd won something. "See?" he said. "Just superstition." Midnight rolled over. 12 o'clock. The hum deepened like a throat clearing. The lights outside sharpened. Marcus didn't notice. He was tapping his fingers on the desk, humming under his breath. I wanted to tell him to stop. Not because it mattered, because it felt like the kind of noise that told the building we were relaxed, and relaxed people make mistakes. At 12:11, the knocking started. 3 knocks. Soft, polite, not banging, not urgent. Marcus's head lifted. "You hear that?" I didn't answer. I didn't want my voice to carry any excitement, any confirmation. 3 knocks again. Marcus stood up. I said, "Don't." He paused, one eyebrow raised. "Don't what?" "Don't go to the south door." Marcus laughed quietly. "Dude, it's probably a maintenance guy. Or Tom messing with us." The knocking stopped the moment his hand touched the door handle, and something on the other side breathed. A slow inhale through rubber seal. Not loud, not dramatic, intimate. Like it was right up against the door, close enough to fog metal if metal could fog. Marcus's smile faded. He looked back at me. Just for a second, and in his eyes I saw the moment the rules stopped being funny. The door didn't rattle, the handle didn't shake, but the rubber around the frame squeaked softly, as if pressure was being applied from the other side. Testing. Marcus pulled his hand away. He took a step back, and the voice came. Muffled, human, close. "Hey," it said. "Open up." Marcus frowned. "Tom?" I didn't move. The voice tried again. "Marcus," it said, and my stomach turned over. Because we hadn't said Marcus's name out loud once since midnight. He swallowed. "Okay, who is that?" I hissed. "Don't talk back." Marcus didn't hear me. He was staring at the door like it owed him an explanation. The voice softened, like it was trying to be kind. "Shh, it's cold," it said. "Let me in." Marcus looked at me again. "This is messed up," I said. "Back away, now." He backed away. 2 steps. 3. The voice changed. It stayed calm, but the friendliness snapped off like a switch. "Open the door," it said, still soft. "We don't like waiting." The lights above us flickered. Not red, yet, but unstable, like they were deciding. Marcus's breathing got loud. He whispered, "What the hell is this?" I didn't answer. I reached for the laminated sheet, slid it across the desk toward him without taking my eyes off the door. Marcus's hands shook as he read. His eyes darted line to line. Rule 5. Never open the south door, even if someone knocks. He swallowed hard. Then the radio clicked. The old plastic box on the desk came alive with static. The transmit light blinked once, then twice. Then the static shaped itself into a whisper. "It's Marcus." His head snapped toward it. I said, "Don't." The whisper came again. "Marcus, you there?" He stared at the radio like it was a snake. I watched his face change in real time. The way people change when they realize something is addressing them personally. Loneliness doesn't just make you stupid, it makes you reachable. Marcus leaned toward the mic without meaning to. I grabbed his wrist, hard. His eyes met mine, angry, embarrassed, like I'd grabbed him in front of an audience. "What?" he mouthed. The voice on the radio grew clearer. "Marcus," it said, "we can help you." I let go of his wrist, not because I trusted him, because my attention flicked to the monitors and I felt my blood go cold. The cameras were still on, but they weren't recording anything new. All 6 screens showed the same thing they had shown 5 minutes ago. Same weed position, same shadow, same grain of noise in the picture, a perfect stillness, a paused world. I glanced at the clock. 2:16, 1 minute before the pause. Except this wasn't just camera 3. This was everything. Marcus noticed me looking. "What's wrong?" he asked. I pointed. He leaned in, and that tiny movement, leaning in, felt like stepping onto thin ice. At 2:17, the lights turned red. Not gradually, instantly. The whole room washed in that dim blood color. Shadows thickened, corners deepened. The hum dropped so low it felt like a pressure wave. Marcus stared around, eyes wide. "Daniel!" I cut him off. "Close your eyes." "What?" "Close your eyes and count to 60. Now." He shook his head, panicking. No, I need to see." "That's the point," I said. "Don't." I squeezed my eyes shut. 1, 2, 3. Marcus didn't. I heard him breathing fast, heard the chair legs scrape as he stood. At 10, I smelled wet earth so strong it made my throat tighten. At 15, the air shifted, like something moved through the room without disturbing it. At 20, I heard a sound behind the south door, no longer polite knocking, a slow dragging, like something heavy being repositioned. Marcus whispered, "Oh my God." I didn't open my eyes. At 30, I felt presence beside me. Close, too close. A slow inhale next to my ear. Then a voice, right in the room, not the radio, not the door. Soft as breath. "Look at me." Marcus made a small sound, half sob, half gasp. I clenched my fists. 40, 41. At 45, the facility made a new sound, a wet, clicking flex, like joints. And then Marcus spoke, just one word. Who? That was all it took. The red light vanished. The overhead bulbs snapped back to harsh white. I opened my eyes. Marcus was standing near the south door. I hadn't heard him walk there. His hand was on the handle again, like the door was pulling him. His face looked empty. Not calm, vacant, like a TV on a channel with no signal. "Marcus," I said, voice shaking. "Step back." He didn't blink. Behind the door, something exhaled, slow, satisfied. The rubber seal squealed as pressure increased. The handle began to turn, not under Marcus's hand, but with it, like the door and his arm were one mechanism. I ran. I grabbed his shoulders, yanked him back with everything I had. Marcus stumbled, but his hand stayed on the handle like it was glued. The radio erupted into static. My name cut through it like a blade. Daniel Hayes. I didn't answer. I dragged Marcus away from the door until his fingers finally slipped free, and the moment he let go, the knocking came again. Not 3 polite knocks. A rapid, impatient rattling. Like fists, like something trying to break manners. Marcus screamed, a raw sound that didn't match him. He backed toward the desk, eyes huge, finally awake again. "What did I do?" he gasped. I said, "You listened." The monitors flickered. For the first time all night, the paused image changed. All 6 cameras showed movement at once. Not clear shapes, just shadows crossing floodlight beams. Too many. Too fast. Like something circling the fence, testing every point. Marcus looked at the screens and started shaking. "This isn't real," he whispered. The facility's hum rose. Not louder, higher, like a note tightening. Then the emergency phone on the wall rang. One ring. I stared at it. No one called that phone. Ever. It rang again. Marcus reached for it. I slapped his hand away. "Don't touch anything," I snapped. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. The phone rang a 3rd time, and then the radio spoke again. Soft. Patient. "Marcus," it said. "Open the door and it stops." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. "Make it stop," he whispered. I felt something cold crawl behind my ribs, because I understood the choice they were presenting. Not to me, to him. It wasn't trying to break the door, it was trying to convince a human to open it. "Marcus," I said, forcing my voice steady. "Look at me. You're here, with me. Don't listen to it." His eyes flicked between me and the south door. Outside, the fence lights flickered, one by one, like a countdown. Then camera 2 went black, not paused, black. A second later, camera 4 went black. Then camera 1. The facility was taking away our eyes. Marcus panicked. "We can't see!" I grabbed the flashlight from the desk and shoved it into his hand. "Sit down. Close your eyes if the lights go red again." He didn't sit. He backed away toward the south hallway, as if distance would help, as if the door wasn't the center of gravity. The knockin' stopped, a silence so total it made my ears ring. Then a voice came from the south door again, muffled but unmistakably human. It sounded like Tom. "Daniel," it said, "open up." My blood iced over, because Tom was outside on the west fence. I'd watched him leave. I'd seen his flashlight beam on camera 4, before it went black. The voice tried again, more urgent. "Daniel, let me in. Something's out here." Marcus turned toward it like a starving man hearing dinner. "Tom," he whispered. I stepped between Marcus and the hallway. "Not Tom," I said. The voice softened, exactly like a friend trying to calm you down. "Daniel," it said. Don't be stupid. It's me. A pause. Then it added, as if remembering something important. Marcus is with you, right? Marcus's face went pale. It knew where we were. It knew who was here. The radio crackled with satisfaction. Open, it whispered. Marcus's hands trembled around the flashlight. If that's Tom, it's not, I said, teeth clenched. It's wearing his voice. Marcus shook his head. You don't know that. I did know. Because the facility had a pattern. It didn't attack head-on. It tested boundaries. It used voices. It used names. It used decency. And now it was using fear. Marcus took one step. I grabbed his jacket. He tore free like an animal. He ran down the hallway. Marcus, no! I chased him. The control room door slammed behind me, not from my hand. The hallway lights dimmed again, that underwater pressure returning instantly. Marcus was already at the south door. He was crying. I'm sorry, he said, not to me. Toward the door, like he was apologizing to a person. 3 knocks, soft again, polite, like it was resetting the tone. Marcus reached for the handle. I lunged. I caught him around the waist and pulled, feet slipping on the carpet. His fingers brushed the metal, and the door breathed, a deep inhale that made the rubber seal sing. Marcus went limp in my arms, not fainting, yielding, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. I felt his weight drop, dead heavy. For a second, I thought I'd saved him. Then, his head lifted. His eyes were open, but they weren't looking at me. They were looking past me, toward the corner of the hallway, toward a section of wall that shouldn't have been interesting at all. And I saw the impossible. The wall in that corner was darker than the rest, like the light didn't touch it. It wasn't a shadow. It was a missing piece of hallway, a hole shaped like a doorway that wasn't there before. Black, deep, breathing ozone. Marcus whispered in a voice that wasn't his. Finally. I let go of him. My body moved on. Instinct. Backing away. Marcus stepped toward the black space. The south door didn't open. It didn't need to. The facility had made another door. Marcus turned his head, just slightly, and smiled at me. A smile too wide, too certain. Then he stepped into the darkness, and he was gone. No scream, no struggle. Just gone. The hallway lights snapped back to normal. The pressure eased. The hum settled. The control room door clicked open behind me, inviting me back like nothing had happened. I stumbled inside. The monitors came back, one by one, showing normal fence lines again. Except something had changed outside. On camera 3, near the gravel where the pause always happened, there was a dark smear, wet earth, and beside it, a long, jointed print. Not a boot, not a hand, a mark that looked like a finger that didn't know when to stop. The radio clicked softly. My name whispered through static. Daniel. I didn't answer. I sat down in Marcus's chair. My hands shook so badly I couldn't hold my coffee. Outside, the fence lights flickered once, like a wink. And in the hum of the building, deep underneath everything else, I could have sworn I heard something that sounded like satisfaction. Like it had just been fed. I'm still working the night shift. That's the part people don't understand when I try to explain it. They think survival means leaving, running, burning the place down in the rearview mirror. But the facility doesn't let you leave clean. It doesn't chase you like a monster in a movie. It waits, and it makes sure you carry it with you. They never replaced Marcus. Not officially. No incident report went out. No email. No meeting. No, we're sorry, nothing. His name just disappeared from the schedule like it had never been typed. Tuesday night, I came in and checked the whiteboard like I always do. Names, shifts, break times. Tom, Ron, Elliot, Daniel. No, Marcus. I stared at the empty space where his name should have been, and I felt the same cold pressure I'd felt in the hallway when the building stretched itself. I asked Tom, just once, "What happened to Marcus?" I said, keeping my voice low like we were in a church. Tom didn't look up from the logbook. "He quit," he said. I laughed because it was ridiculous. Tom finally raised his eyes, and there was no humor in them. "He quit," Tom repeated, slower this time, as if saying it the right way would make it true. Then he went back to writing. That was the closest thing I ever got to an explanation. Elliot wouldn't meet my eyes for a week. Ron acted like Marcus had never existed. The facility had taken him, and then it erased him. That's what it does. It doesn't punish mistakes. It collects them. And once it collects you, it files you away where no one can find you again. After Marcus, I stopped testing anything. I stopped leaning toward the monitors, stopped asking questions, stopped trying to map logic onto something that didn't operate like a human mind. I follow the rules now, every single one. Not because I'm brave, because I've seen what happens to people who aren't. Some nights, the job is almost normal again. The hum is steady. The lights stay white. The air smells like warm plastic and stale coffee. The cameras show empty fence lines and nothing else. Those nights are the worst, because they make you think you imagined it. They make you wonder if you overreacted, if you let fear build a story out of shadows and static. And then you remember the smell of wet earth, the red light, the way the hallway opened a door that wasn't there. You remember Marcus's eyes going empty, and you stop doubting. I started writing things down after that, not in the official log. Official logs get checked. Official logs get corrected. Official logs get rewritten to make the facility look safe. I wrote in a small notebook I kept in my jacket pocket. Pencil, not pen. Something I could tear out and burn if I needed to. Date, time, what I saw, what I smelled, what the radio said. Most nights the entries were short. 1:03, west light blinked twice. 1:41, gate floodlight dimmed. 2:17, camera 3 paused. Ozone smell. 3:02, footsteps above. Stayed still. I never wrote Marcus's name. Not because I wanted to forget him, because I was afraid the facility would notice the ink. Like writing his name would invite it to look at the page and remember it still owned him. Weeks passed, then months. The rhythm of the night became a cruel routine. You learn to live inside rules the way you learn to live inside winter. Layered, careful, never taking warmth for granted. Sometimes I'd drive into town on my day off and stand in a crowded grocery store, listening to people complain about prices, about traffic, about their kids' school schedules, normal problems. And I'd feel like an alien, like I was wearing a mask of normalcy over something that didn't belong in daylight. I wanted to quit. I did, sort of. I filled out the paperwork. I handed it to the supervisor, same guy who slid the laminated sheet across the desk on my first day. He scanned it, expression flat. Then he pushed it back to me. "You're scheduled next week," he said. "That's not what this is," I told him. He looked at me like I'd missed an obvious rule. "Night shift doesn't work like that," he said. "People leave jobs," I said, forcing the words out. "That's how it works." The supervisor leaned closer, just a little, and for the first time I noticed his eyes. Not tired, not angry, just empty in a way that made my stomach tighten. "People leave," he agreed. "Not this one." He tapped the laminated sheet with one finger. "Follow the rules," he said quietly, "and you'll be fine." Then he smiled. Small, polite, like a customer service smile. And I realized something that made my blood go cold. The facility didn't just collect mistakes, it collected people. And it kept the ones it found useful. Last night I worked alone. Tom called in sick. Ron had family stuff. Elliot was on perimeter duty. So it was just me. Me, the hum and the monitors. At 11:59, I didn't even consider stepping outside anymore. I locked the control room door from the inside and sat down. Midnight passed. Nothing moved outside the fence. No knocking, no radio voice. For a while, I almost relaxed. Then the clock crawled toward 2:17. My mouth went dry. My hands started sweating. My eyes flicked to camera 3 like they always do. 2:16. The air got heavy. Ozone. Wet earth underneath. Faint but unmistakable. 2:17. The camera paused. 5 seconds. Same frame. Same angle. I didn't lean in. I didn't blink. When the feed returned, the gravel looked the same. But I knew better than to trust same. Because same is how it hides. I checked the lights. Still white. I started to breathe again. Then the radio turned on by itself. A soft click. Static filled the room. And in that static, a whisper formed with perfect patience. My name. Daniel Hayes. I didn't answer. I didn't even swallow. I stared at the rule sheet on the desk like it was the only thing holding the room together. Daniel. The radio whispered again, gentler this time, as if it was trying to sound familiar. Like Marcus. Like Tom. Like a friend. My throat tightened. I closed my eyes. Rule 6. Count to 60. 1. The hum deepened. 2. A soft scuff came from the hallway outside the control room. 3. The door handle made the faintest sound. Metal settling. 4. I smelled wet earth stronger, like someone had opened a basement door. 5. A whisper came. Not from the radio now, but from the other side of the control room door. Close. Breathing distance. Daniel, it said. I kept counting. 10. The whisper stayed. 15. I heard something that sounded like a smile. 20. The floorboards outside creaked under weight, not pacing, standing, waiting. 30. The voice on the other side of the door began to count with me, softly, perfectly timed. 31. It breathed right after I did. 32. 33. My stomach rolled. I kept counting anyway. 40. The counting matched. 50. Closer now, like it was leaning into the gap beneath the door. 58. 59. 60. I opened my eyes. The radio was off. The monitors were normal. The lights were white. The air smelled like electronics again. But I didn't move, because outside the door, in the hallway, something scraped once, slow and satisfied, like a boot turning away. And then, very gently, 3 knocks, polite, patient, on the south door.